All right, let's talk about something we've probably all seen, but maybe never really understood. That blood test report your doctor gives you. We're going to decode some of those numbers and what they're actually trying to tell you.
You know exactly what I'm talking about, right? You get this piece of paper, and it's just this alphabet soup of letters and numbers. WBC, RBC, PLT. It feels like you need a secret decoder ring just to figure out what you're looking at. Well, what if I told you that buried in that list is one value you've probably skipped right over, called MPV? And what's really interesting is that this single number can be a quiet but powerful clue about what's going on inside your body, especially when it comes to things like inflammation and even your heart health. So let's get into it. Okay, so before we can even begin to understand MPV, which stands for mean platelet volume, we've got to get to know the P in that acronym. So let's start with the basics. What in the world are platelets? So imagine your blood is this bustling highway. You've got your red blood cells carrying oxygen, your white blood cells fighting off invaders, and then you have these little guys, the platelets. They're all in there together, each with a super important job. We're going to focus on them. So platelets, or PLT as you see on the report, are pretty cool. They aren't even really whole cells. They're just tiny little fragments that break off from these giant cells back in your bone marrow. The best way to think of them is like your body's own personal paramedics. Anytime there's an injury, like a cut, they're the first ones to rush to the scene to plug the hole and start the whole healing cascade. So the first thing a lab test usually tells you is your platelet count. A normal, healthy range is somewhere between 150 and 400 billion of them per liter of blood. This number tells you how many emergency responders you have on your team. But as we're about to find out, it doesn't tell you the whole story. And that brings us right to the main event, MPV. Because it turns out when we're talking about platelets, it's not just about how many you have. The quality, and specifically their size, matters a whole lot. So what is MPV? It simply stands for mean platelet volume. It's a totally routine part of a blood count that's calculated automatically, and it does exactly what the name suggests. It tells you the average size of your platelets. You see, it's one thing to know how many players are on the field, but it's another thing to know how big and powerful those players are. And here's the absolute key to understanding all of this. Size is often linked to age and activity. Think of it like this. The big platelets are the young, energetic rookies, fresh out of the bone marrow. They are way more active, way stickier, and much better at forming clots. The smaller platelets, they're the older veterans. They've been around the block, they're a bit tired, and less reactive. So a higher MPV suggests you have a younger, more potent squad of platelets. Okay, so if MPV tells us about the size and reactivity of our platelets, what does it actually mean if that number is high? Let's put on our detective hats for a second and see where the clues lead. And this really gets to the heart of it. A lot of research backs this up. MPV is seen as a really solid indicator of something called platelet reactivity. That's just the sciencey way of saying how ready and eager your platelets are to clump together and form clots. So this is really important. A high MPV isn't a disease in itself, but it can be a signal. It can mean your body is churning out these larger, more active platelets for a reason. Maybe it's in response to some kind of inflammation somewhere in your body, like in chronic conditions. It has also been associated with a higher risk for cardiovascular issues, because stickier platelets can sometimes cause clots where you don't want them. Or sometimes it's totally normal, like your body just making new platelets after you've had some blood loss. But here's where the plot thickens. Your MPV isn't just about what's happening in your body at this very moment. Your own personal genetic code can actually play a pretty big part in determining what your baseline platelet size is. So let's look at a real-world example. There was a study on patients with high blood pressure, and it found that small variations in a gene could be linked to different MPV levels. People with one specific version of the gene tended to have a higher MPV. But get this, the group with the absolute highest MPV were the patients who had both high blood pressure and heart disease. It just goes to show you that MPV is one piece of a much bigger puzzle that includes your overall health, other conditions, and even your DNA. Okay, so we've learned what platelets are, what MPV is measuring, and what a high number might mean. So what's the big takeaway here? What are you actually supposed to do with this info? If you remember one thing, let it be this. Your MPV result is not the final answer. It is one single clue in the very complex mystery of your health. It gives you a hint, but it never ever tells the whole story by itself.
And that is precisely why you have a doctor. They're the lead detective in this investigation. They're not just looking at your MPV, they're looking at everything, all your lab results, your medical history, your lifestyle, how you feel, to put all those clues together and see what's really going on. So, here is your super simple, actionable game plan. 1. Look at MTV as an interesting indicator, not a scary diagnosis. 2. If you see on your report that it's flagged high or low, don't panic. Just make a mental note of it. And 3, the most important step, bring it up with your doctor at your next visit. Just ask, hey, I noticed my MPV was a little high. Is that something we should think about, given everything else? So you see, just by understanding one little line on a lab report, you're now way better equipped to be an active partner in your own healthcare. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? What other important secrets are hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be decoded in your own health data?